Hello YouTube, Internet, world. Welcome back to another episode of Dime Store Cinema. Well, let's talk movies. We'll call this Dime Store Cinema on the road. I don't have much time to record, so thinking I might just start recording while I'm on my way to work. So today I'd like to talk about the soon-to-be cult classic 2016 The Void. Now, anyone who knows me at all knows that this type of movie is right in my wheelhouse. It is the kind of movie that I love. Now, I'm gonna go ahead and get the negative out of the way first. So, the negative of this movie is that you can tell that the filmmakers don't have a lot of experience. It is somewhat of an amateur film, not so much in the execution or the acting or even really the direction. It's an amateur film in that it doesn't know how to progress the story in a way that maximizes the effect of the story. So, for instance, The Shining, which, you know, when you're talking about a film that relies very heavily on the viewer being uncomfortable and on edge and battling feelings of anxiety, The Shining is one of the best. The Shining is a great example of how to do that effectively. And one of the ways that Kubrick was able to do it so effectively is that he would ramp up and ramp up and ramp up, and then you would have somewhat of a calm. He never really let off of the creep factor, but there was enough of a pause to where people started questioning things, and you could take the time to actually look at things in the background, and you could really get involved with the characters. He knew how to pace the story in a way that maximized that effect. Now, The Void, it's probably its biggest weakness is that it didn't take any time. It didn't take any time at all. It just was, once it started going, it just kept going. Now, with some movies, that's awesome. Like, you get some great action films, and that's awesome, because, you know, that's what you want. You just want the action to take over, and that's all it is. You know, you have, like, The Raid and The Raid Redemption, Shoot 'em Up, movies like that. Like, that's a lot of fun. But when you're dealing with something that is meant to cause anxiety and meant to mentally and even physically exhaust the viewer, like this movie is, in order to pace the story properly, you need to have those moments of rest. You need to have those character moments where you can really get in and care about the characters, because that takes it from just feeling uncomfortable to making you genuinely anxious about the characters. And there's a huge difference between the two things. There's a big difference between just being uncomfortable about what you're watching and genuinely being anxious about the characters who are going through a horrible thing. That was the only fault that I really have with this movie. Maybe some editing issues, but once again, I think that was mainly had more to do with the budget and with their constraints. They edited around a few things that didn't turn out as good as they were hoping. I'm pretty sure is what happened with that. So I don't hold that against it as much, because I would rather them do some creative editing than to try to show something that doesn't work. It shows that the directors and the editors actually like movies and are interested in making it as good as it can be. It shows that they're actually interested. They're not just gonna, oh, we spent a lot of time on this, so I'm gonna show it regardless. No, they're gonna do what they can. They're gonna do what they can to make it good. So that being said, okay, so that's the negative. That's the only negative that I have. And tying into that, one of the, I guess you could call it a positive. I watched this movie with my wife. My wife likes horror movies, not as much as I do. She's not as much of a film nerd as I am. I don't know many people who are. I know a few who definitely are much more knowledgeable than I am. And for a long time in my life, my sister actually really influenced me to get much more into film history than I was. So there have definitely been influences in that case. But in any case, I watched this with my wife, and when the movie was over, and this I think is a very good way of summing up the movie, she leans over to me and she says, "Baby, I need an Ativan after watching that." And I think that is very fair with this movie, because, like I was saying before, and it's one of the weaknesses of the film, there's no break for anyone. You know, you're stuck in this ever spiraling chaos. There's no break, and the directors, and I know they did it on purpose, and they did it really, really well. It's a tactic that Rob Zombie does, but when Rob Zombie does it, it's awful, and I hate it, and I think he's a garbage filmmaker. But that's neither here nor there, because I'm not talking about his movies. These directors, and I can't remember their names off the top of my head. I believe it is Jeremy Gillespie and let me check. Jeremy Gillespie and Steve. I don't know the other guy's name. His first name is Steve. I know that. Sorry, guys, if you watch this, which you probably aren't going to, but if you do, I'm sorry I can't remember your name. You did a fantastic job, and thank you for making this amazing film. In any case, they did something that I think is a really brave choice, and not many filmmakers can pull it off effectively. But everything in this movie is dissonant. It is very unpleasant. The lighting is unpleasant. The people are unpleasant. The color scheme is unpleasant. The sound is unpleasant. Everything is unpleasant. Now, when I say that, I don't mean bad. I don't mean that it's bad. I mean that it invokes a visceral response. Every single element of this movie forces a visceral response from the viewer. And like I said, Rob Zombie does this, but when he does it, he attaches it to a movie that is just, there is absolutely no redeeming qualities. He never has any characters that are worth following. He never incorporates anything that is even remotely interesting in his films. He just makes them unpleasant. That's his goal. He just makes it dirty and gross. So there's no point in watching the movie because there's no one to follow and there's no story to be invested in. This movie, it has all of those elements, except that I do care about the characters, at least to an extent. That's one of the weaknesses of the film is the character development. However, I don't dislike the characters. There's not the people that are, the people aren't insufferable. They're not awful human beings. They're not terrible, so there's that. And then also, the way that the film is made, it's much more of a throwback to earlier films. So if you're a film nerd, you get really geek out about that. So that gives you something else to latch onto, to follow. So you have these characters that you enjoy watching in a style that you enjoy watching, practical effects which you enjoy watching and you love seeing if you're like me. So you have those elements that pull you back in, even though every element of the movie is just like glaringly painful. But because it is glaringly painful, it makes the tension while you're watching it so much more heightened. So it just puts you on the edge of your seat. A lot of times you don't realize it until your shoulders are up in your ears and you realize that you have a tension headache because you've just been clenching every muscle because everything is just putting you on edge about this movie. Now, I know that type of movie is not for everyone. I know there are a lot of people who hate that kind of thing. And like I said, that is a problem because with that type of movie, you have to have those moments. In order to pass goodness and be great, you have to have those character moments, those moments that slow it down and allow the audience to really kind of focus on the characters. Like I said, The Shining does that masterfully. It's why that movie is one of the greatest horror films, greatest films ever made. So, yes. All right. So the plot of this movie is it's interesting in its simplicity. It starts right off. There's no getting to know anyone. You see a person trying to escape a house and is immediately killed. And then you see them set the body on fire. You see two guys set the body that they just killed on fire. And going back to my wife, when we started watching it, it was kind of funny because that was the first scene in the entire movie is they shoot this woman in the back and then they light her body on fire. And she looks at me and she's like, "Justin, what the hell are we watching?" And, I explained to her that this is a movie that I'd been wanting to see for months and months and months, since probably before they finished making the film. I've wanted to see this movie just based on different things that I've read about the way they were making it. So she, despite her initial reaction, decided that she would sit there and watch it with me. But I mean, it's an accurate. I mean, it's a valid question. The very first scene of a movie, you see a woman who, the actress portrayed fear and terror very well, trying to escape these men who shoot her in the back and then burn her corpse. It's an interesting way to start a film, but it's very fitting for this film because that is the movie. This movie just is that all the way through. So then after that scene, you have a police officer. Looks like he's a sheriff of a very quiet town, not much crime. As the movie goes on, you learn that he has a past that has kind of broken him a little bit. So, you have the tortured police officer, which, is somewhat of a tired trope, but I like that they didn't spend a lot of time making him wallow in that. So that was good, even though it is, a tired trope. It wasn't the focal point. It was just a subtext. I thought they did the subtext okay. In any case, he comes across a man who looks like he's badly beaten, drug addict of some kind. So he gets this person, picks them up and takes them to the local hospital. The local hospital is in the course of, I believe, closing down and relocating. So their skeleton crew, staff there, I think one doctor, a nurse, and a college student in her residency. So we have a pregnant lady and her father in the waiting room when they wheel in this guy who is on the verge of death. And so as soon as they get into the hospital, these people in hoods and a triangle, black triangle on the hood. So as soon as that happens, you're kind of in on the fact that this is some type of cult going on. There's some type of cult in the town. Something weird is going on. It kind of hints at, when they kill the lady at the very beginning, that there's something else going on. The people who kill her aren't just murderers. They have some kind of motivation. So there's a little bit going on there. But then when the guy shows up with the hood on, you realize, okay, there's some kind of cult. So still at this point, you think that it's just people, though. Then we get into the hospital, and that's when all hell breaks loose. We realize there are supernatural elements. We realize that the cult, the pregnant lady, is a member of the cult. We realize that the doctor has been doing experiments on people, kidnapping people, trying to summon a portal to an alternate dimension. Lots and lots of cultish imagery and gore galore, and just absolute insanity. The building is alive. It is constantly changing. Staircases appear that were never part of the original building. Walls disappear. Walls reappear. People get lost in a building they've worked in for years. It's just craziness. And I loved it. I loved it so much. It's just been so long since I've been able to just sit back and watch a crazy film. Just a horror film that was actually being a horror film. It wasn't trying to be... it wasn't marketing itself to teenagers. It wasn't doing boring jump scares. It wasn't going for PG-13 nonsense. It wasn't trying to be anything other than a straight, absolutely insane horror film. And it was that. It succeeded on what it was trying to do so well. I just want to give all of the kudos to these directors, and I really want them to keep making movies. I really want them to influence filmmakers to make original content. And I really hope that, once again, practical effects will continue to gain momentum. Because in recent years, all of the best horror films and just films in general have really relied a great deal on practical effects, and it's been coming back around. People are getting more away from, at least in the circles of people who are genuinely interested in making movies instead of making just money. Practical effects have really started to come back around, which is super exciting, super exciting. So I'm really excited because I'm getting to talk to you about a movie that I genuinely geeked out about, and I know that not a lot of people will like it, or I know it's not for everyone. I know some people won't like it for the horror aspect. Some people won't like it for how tense it makes you. But I'm just really excited that I have something I can geek out about. I was able to geek out about It Follows. I was able to geek out about The Babadook, which I haven't done reviews of those, and I will, because once again, I'll get to geek out about them. But it's so infrequently that I genuinely get to geek out about a movie. I really geeked out about Arrival, but that was more for the content than the movie itself. The movie was good, it was well made, but the filmmaking aspect of it isn't why I geeked out. I geeked out because they had a the hero be a linguist, which is amazing. Is amazing, and I've always wanted to get into linguistics more than I have, but I have a really hard time with foreign languages, which has always been the big thing holding me back. Being dyslexic and dealing with attention issues has made it really hard to learn other languages. However, I have studied the English language quite a bit, and etymology, and that aspect of linguistics I find fascinating, and the fact that language itself determines how you think, I find to be absolutely fascinating. And how Arrival, and once again, I'm sorry I'm talking about Arrival in a movie, in a review about The Void, but I'm talking about films that make me geek out, and The Arrival is one that made me geek out. So, dealing with the idea that language affects the way you think, which, is in a sense the way you perceive things, and then dealing with the idea that maybe your perception actually affects your reality, or how you experience reality, which is interesting. I find it very interesting. But yeah, so yes, I geeked out about this film. All of that to say that I geeked out about this film. I don't geek out about films very often anymore because, there aren't many worth geeking out over. I don't, it just feels like everything has become so cynical. And I'm all for a cynical story, but there's a difference between a story that is cynical in its irony, or cynical in its satire, and a story that comes from a place of cynicism. There's a difference between, say, South Park making fun of politics in the way they do using satire, and Lars von Trier, who is a nihilist, and everything that he makes is oppressively cynical. There's a difference between those two things, and I feel, and I don't want to say I feel, I know, just based on researching and watching a shit ton of movies, that cynicism is the overarching sentiment of cinema these days. And I don't even think that a lot of times it's on purpose. I just think that we live in a very cynical time. People are very unhappy, and it's cool to be unhappy sometimes, I think. And it bleeds